I'm Fiona Calloway, 35 years old. Just minutes after the judge finalized my divorce, I made the most important phone call of my life. Dad, I said, standing on the courthouse steps with the signed divorce papers still in my hand. Fire every one of the 27 employees my former in-laws placed inside the company. My voice trembled as I spoke. My fingers were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped my phone before my father finally answered. My father, Harold Calloway, founded Calloway Steel Fabrication in 1987 with nothing more than a rented warehouse and an ambitious dream. Over the decades, he transformed it into one of the largest structural steel suppliers in the region. On my 30th birthday, he transferred 25% ownership of the company to me, telling me it wasn't just an investment. It was my responsibility to protect and grow. 8 years earlier, I had married Reginald Voss. From the moment I met his family, especially his mother, Delphine Voss, I sensed something unsettling. She never openly demanded control over my father's business, but her intentions were obvious behind carefully chosen words. She would smile and say, "Family should support family. Reginald's relatives have so much talent. It would be a shame not to give them opportunities." At first, her suggestions seemed harmless, but over time, one relative after another found a place inside our company. Cousins joined procurement, nephews entered logistics, family friends appeared in payroll, and even the internal audit department slowly filled with people personally connected to Delphine. My father trusted me completely. He believed my marriage had united two families, so he approved every recommendation I brought to him without hesitation. He never questioned why so many new employees shared my husband's last name or had close ties to his family. It took me 6 long years to realize I wasn't witnessing coincidence. I was watching a carefully planned takeover. The warning signs were subtle in the beginning. A shipment invoice would disappear without explanation. A longtime supplier would suddenly lose its contract to a business registered under Delphine's maiden name. Then larger problems surfaced. Massive steel orders that normally required multiple approvals were being authorized with only a single signature, usually from Reginald's cousin, Desmond, who managed procurement. Another relative, Preston, who supervised logistics, regularly redirected shipments to a secondary warehouse that technically didn't even exist within our official company records. I mentioned my concerns to Reginald one evening over dinner. He laughed and dismissed everything, saying I was imagining problems where none existed and accusing me of being suspicious of people who only wanted it. Months later, when I brought it up again with more evidence, his attitude changed completely. He became distant and defensive, insisting I was ungrateful for everything his mother had supposedly done to help our company succeed. That's when I stopped asking questions. Instead, I quietly hired a forensic accountant. I paid her in cash and met her twice every week at a small coffee shop nearly 40 minutes away from home, making sure no one connected us. We kept everything completely confidential. It took almost 11 months to uncover the full truth. There were 27 employees strategically placed throughout my father's company, every single one connected to Delphine Voss by blood, marriage, or long-standing personal relationships. They occupied positions in every department that mattered. Together, they had quietly drained nearly $4 million from the business over 6 years through inflated invoices, fake consulting payments, and a shell logistics company that billed us for warehouse space, which turned out to be nothing more than an empty lot behind a strip mall owned by Delphine herself. I never confronted Reginald with the evidence. Instead, I filed for divorce without making a scene, citing irreconcilable differences. Then I locked the accountant's report inside my desk and waited patiently until the divorce became legally final. Some people might call that silence weakness. I call it perfect timing. For 6 years, I stayed quiet and gathered evidence. I waited because I knew the moment I was legally free from Reginald, I would no longer owe his family a single ounce of loyalty or protection. Once the divorce was final, there would be nothing standing between me and the truth. As I stood outside the courthouse in a charcoal gray blazer, the one I had chosen because it reminded me of the leader I was meant to be, I called my father. In less than 5 minutes, I told him everything I had uncovered over the past 6 years. I explained the shell company, the fake invoices, the non-existent warehouse, and the carefully organized fraud that had been draining the business. Then I said the words I had rehearsed in my mind countless times. Fire all 27 employees my former in-laws placed inside the company. Effective immediately. Have security escort. Every one of them out before the day end. There was complete silence on the other end of the phone. Finally, my father spoke. Send me the report. That was all he needed to hear. Within 20 minutes, Human Resources had the complete list of names. Within 2 hours, every termination was underway. Looking back, acting that quickly may have been the smartest decision I ever. Because later that same evening, while I was unpacking boxes inside the small rental house where I had been living during the separation, someone started pounding on my front door. The knocking was so loud and aggressive that my neighbor's porch lights flickered on one after another. When I opened the door, Delphine Voss was standing there. In 8 years of forced holiday dinners and carefully rehearsed smiles, I had never once seen my former mother-in-law lose control. Now her face was bright red with anger. Before I could say a single word, she exploded. She demanded that I reverse every termination immediately. Then, in front of my neighbors and anyone else who happened to be listening, she swore that I would regret ever being born into the Calloway family for daring to take away what she believed rightfully belonged to her. I stood quietly in my doorway as the evening sunlight faded behind her. For years I had gone out of my way to avoid moments exactly like this. But for the first time since meeting her, I wasn't afraid. I felt completely calm. "You need to leave my property," I said evenly. She let out a cold, mocking laugh. "You have no idea what you've just done," she snapped. She insisted that Reginald's family had helped build my father's company. She argued that the 27 employees I'd fired all had families who depended on those paychecks, accusing me of destroying innocent lives out of revenge. I looked her directly in the eyes. "The only thing anyone has been destroying," I replied, "is my father's business." I told her that a forensic investigation had documented every stolen dollar and that the complete report was already with my attorney. For just a brief moment, her expression changed. The anger was still there, but underneath it I caught something else. Fear. She realized I wasn't making accusations without proof. I had evidence. Seeing that threats weren't working, she changed tactics almost instantly. Her voice softened, and she became the same charming woman she always pretended to be whenever she wanted something. She told me Reginald still loved me. She said everything could be fixed if I simply reconsidered the divorce, reinstated the employees, and agreed to put the past behind us for the sake of the family. The speed of her transformation was almost impressive. Less than 30 seconds earlier, she had been threatening me. Now she was pleading for reconciliation. I shook my head. "There is nothing left to reconsider. The divorce is final. The employees are gone. And this chapter of my life is permanently closed." I looked at Delphine without the slightest hesitation. "The divorce is final," I said. "The terminations are final. And if you, Desmond, Preston, or any of the other 25 employees want to challenge those decisions, you're welcome to take us to court." I paused before adding the part one knew she feared most. Because the moment that happens, the forensic accounting report becomes part of the public record. Everything changed in an instant. The shouting stopped. Instead of yelling, Delphine began threatening lawsuits. She claimed she had influential friends, powerful attorneys, and enough connections to make my life miserable. She promised this wasn't over. I didn't argue. I simply closed the door. The weeks that followed were far more difficult than I had imagined, not because I questioned my